So today I am interviewing Ms. Wilcox because she grew up in Los Alamos, New Mexico, which was the laboratory where they made the first atomic bomb in World War II. Right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, Miss Wilcox, what was it like to grow up in such a highly secured city?
It was, I would say, just like living on a military base, basically. We had, the entire town was fenced in. We had military guards standing all along different areas on the fences. We had a large gate. There was only one way into the city, and that was the only way to go through security guards through the gate to get into the town. You had to be FBI approved to even get into the town. So like my grandparents, we had to fill out forms for them to be able to come. We had to meet them at the gate and approve them coming in. So it was very secure. We had no crime at all that I remember. We left our doors open, our cars unlocked.
Wow.
You know, if there was a petty crime, it was unusual, like someone stealing something out of your car or whatever. Very patrolled.
So, did you guys, when you were little, do you remember, like, traveling a lot, or was it you stayed in Los Alamos?
We stayed pretty much in Los Alamos. We could go out. It was just a long process to go through the gate, to be able to leave. Our letters were all viewed going in and out, so the government could cancel stuff out of the letters from your family, relatives.
Like what kind of things? Like questions that someone would ask you from outside the city, or
Correct.
any sort of information that they thought was...
Right.
Okay.
Or if we would say something by chance about the city or about the bomb or whatever. You know, I was there right after they dropped the bomb. So it was even more secure, I'm sure, before I got there, but it was secure totally till I was 10 years old.
And after, when you turned 10, did they then release all the information to the public?
No, the information's never been released.
Oh, really?
No, the town was just opened, the gate was closed, so people could kind of come and go more freely. Still fenced in, still a lot of guards, a lot of security. You couldn't get near the labs at all.
Oh, really?
Just people that worked there only.
So did you ever, like, growing up, remember your dad coming home, and did he ever work at home, or was that all at the lab?
It was all at the lab.
He never brought any sort of paperwork, or...
Till the day he died, I never knew a thing he did.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Did he ever tell your mom anything? Like, oh, wow.
Very, very, very secretive.
And that was everyone who worked
Everyone.
there? Even janitors and...
Correct. Only the people that worked in the labs knew what was going on. I'm sure it was probably very, very hard for the women there because of the secrecy. You know, your husband comes home and says, I can't tell you a thing I did today. Don't even ask. I can show you, there's just a quick picture, it's kind of interesting, of a driver's license. But you can see the name, it has a number, 144 or something like that. The address is P.O. Box, Santa Fe.
Yeah.
Occupation, what's it say? Housewife or something like that. Everybody that had driver's licenses they didn't know who they were. I mean, this was the
Oh,
driver's
really?
license, so they had recorded Miss Wilcox was number 144 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the general public, you know, people coming in, this is what it was like.
So there was not a lot of outside people that would come in.
No,
So you knew everyone in the town basically, and
right, right. When I was there was one school in the whole town, and it housed kindergarten through 12th grade. It was called Central School. And that's where I started. I went there till 4th grade, and then they started building other schools to accommodate the community. But today, there is still only one high school.
Oh,
and one middle school.
Wow.
Mhm.
So you go back now because you still have family in Los
Correct.
Alamos.
Yes.
So when you go back, you can definitely see a difference between when you were growing up and now.
Oh, yes. When I was first little, tiny, I moved there when I was 2 months old, so I basically grew up there.
Mm-hmm.
But the roads were all mud roads. We had no paved roads. You have to consider it was a community that was built just to build the bomb. There
Mhm.
wasn't a community there. So they put Quonset huts and makeshift homes. This is just a picture of the home that I lived in. If you can see it. So it was, there was 4 units, 2 on top, 2 on the bottom. On the back here, this is what most of the town looked like. It was called Quonset huts. They were just metal, round huts. You can see the roads.
Yeah.
This is a picture of the main lodge that was there when they started building the town, because the town used to be a boys' school.
The whole town.
It was just a big lodge. They brought in boys from back east primarily to teach them about the West, a lot of health issues. You know, the boys came because they were ill. Very, very remote. Only one way in, one way out. Up a steep, steep, steep incline, curvy road to get to the town, and it still is that way today.
So do you have any family members that work at the lab or used to work at the lab? Like more current years?
My sister's husband is still working at the lab.
And is it still,
It's still
just as-
secretive.
and does anyone know what kind of like work they do now there?
I'm going to say probably not. We still are building weapons
Mm-hmm.
today. I think I read an article that they have 80-some weapons that are nuclear weapons just set aside,
Oh, wow.
just in case.
And so growing up, did you ever remember a time where you thought like that's not normal, or did you ever hear things that from like your grandparents came into town, they would tell you things and you were like, oh, we do that differently, or like, oh, we're not allowed to go do that kind of thing?
Well, and like I said, I've never lived on a military base, but we had curfew.
Oh, really?
We had to be in during the week at 10, and
And that was for everyone?
everyone. On the weekends, midnight. We had a big bell alarm go off at 8 o'clock every morning to say school started, work started.
Wow.
We had a bell go off at 5 o'clock every afternoon saying work ended, kids go home. So, I mean, if that's different than
Mhm.
today, but how you're living, yeah, that's how we live. So we always knew, okay, we need to be in class, it's 8 o'clock, we need to go home, it's 5 o'clock. So that would be different, that type
Yeah.
thing. You were taught just to not ask questions of any kind. I don't remember ever asking my dad questions about what he did. I can show you pictures unless you're going to ask me other questions more relative to this. Is a picture. My dad's down here in the bottom, but you can see that says warning.
Mm-hmm.
All kinds of gamma rays, explosives, whatever. But my dad is pouring radium into a vial, and you can see how unprotected he is.
Yeah.
He just has a lab coat, some gloves. They just didn't know they didn't know how dangerous any of it was. But this is kind of a picture of one. It's called the water boiler, is what it was called. This particular reactor.
Yeah.
And it was just for testing to see how reactive bombs were and so forth.
Wow.
So that came out years later. It was taken of him, but still doesn't tell anything really
Yeah.
what he's doing.
So do you remember that picture coming out?
When it came out?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
were you like, hey, that's my dad?
That's exactly right. He's in books. This picture is in all kinds of history books about the town.
That's very cool.
The picture hung in the museum for quite a few years. I don't know if it still is.
Wow, that's very cool. So you said that it was like really like low crime and there was not a lot of like any like mischief going on, so it was really safe, so you guys would just go out and walk around town and...
You could walk, the town was small enough as far as the shopping, the town area, that you could walk at night.
And you never felt like,
as kids,
oh, I shouldn't go there.
No. We had underground tunnels in the town that were built for secret stuff. So as a teenager, I would go sneak down in the tunnels. But they're still there as of today.
As more of like,
I don't think they're even used for anything. I mean, they're just there.
they're just there.
The government came in and just said, this is such a remote area. Nobody knows about it. We don't have to let anybody know about it. And we'll just build this little community. They had to because they brought families in for all the scientists that were going to be working there. So they tried to make it as homey as they could, building a hospital, school, all this that wasn't there when it started.
And so growing up, did you have a lot of kids your age too, or because it was younger families that came in?
It was primarily, let me put it this way, it was a lot of single men and single women, military, that came in to protect the city, and then the scientists were probably a little bit older. So there was a huge boom of babies born, all about my age, within a few years,
So they had a lot of, like going into your kindergarten class, there was a lot of you guys going into that first kind of class.
And probably the first graduating class was 1945, and I think if I remember it was 20-some kids, maybe if that. When I graduated, it was 350.
Oh, wow.
So I would say majority of the families probably left within a few years after the war. The scientists began to dwindle because the main person that kind of started, I'll just show you, these two were the main characters. That's Robert Oppenheimer and Leslie Groves. He was the military side, he was the scientist. And they worked very closely to
Yeah.
build the bomb. He was the main instigator. I would say he only stayed for a couple years, both of them, and then they left and went back into, he actually was a teacher in Berkeley.
Oh.
So they were
Interesting.
brought in from all over. I mean, there's all kinds of German scientists, all kinds that came in, built the bomb, and then dispersed.
And then left.
But all their people that they trained is what stayed.
Oh, okay.
So when my dad came in, he came in as a physicist position, just to continue working on all the secret stuff. Because he worked there till probably 1970, maybe.
Okay. You guys never found anything that was like at their house that was like, oh look, this is one of his whatever's.
He never brought anything home.
And were they not allowed to?
I'm sure not. Work was work, period. They had a lot of the wives working as secretaries probably, or phone operators, that probably knew what was going on, but they didn't know any details, I'm sure.
So do you remember like the first time you sort of realized like what was going on? Like in terms of like how important the city was to...
I was probably older, and maybe when they closed the gates at 10, did I really realize how secret it had been. Growing up, that was normal to me.
Yeah.
I didn't know any different. We would drive to Santa Fe or go visit relatives in Colorado. But I don't remember until I was a little bit older that I saw a difference.
Between cities.
Right. I think from being little, we were told, things they're doing here are all secret to protect our country. So just don't ask. It was very, very, very ingrained in the community, the secrecy. I mean, the whole state of New Mexico knew there was something going on up on top of the mountain. And
That's it.
that's what they knew. Yeah, they didn't know what it was for, what it was. I mean, nobody knew about the bomb until it actually happened, until it actually was dropped.
And they did a test. They did
a
one test.
in southern New Mexico, down in, it's called White Sands, and I thought I had a picture. Actually, they called the site Trinity,
Yeah.
and just since we're talking about that, something kind of fun, but what happened is the sand, the rocks, everything that was in this desert area where they did the test turned pure green, everything, and it's called Trinitite is the name of it, and this isn't really it, it's just giving you an example, but that was just from the test. It's because the bomb went off, very full of radiation.
Yeah.
I mean, it was very deadly.
Wow.
So. So here, just a little picture showing that's from the test. The bomb,
Wow.
The bomb going off, mushroom looking like.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. They were very protected. They were miles and miles away with cameras to watch it go off. They had no idea what it was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So
And so that was before they dropped the atomic bomb.
Right, they tested this to see if all their chemicals, all their building would even work. And when they realized it did work, then they built the bombs. And they actually built two. One is called Little Boy, which is this one. And then one's called Fat Boy. Fat Man. Little Boy and Fat Man.
Wow.
These were the two that were dropped on Japan. Here's a picture of the gate.
Oh, so it's similar to like a border patrol kind of thing.
Exactly. What you would know of today.
Okay.
This is a picture of the area, the community.
Oh wow.
Very, very mountainous. So just to give you
And it's on like top of a mountain.
correct. What happened was, just to give you a really brief beginning, it was a existing volcano, probably millions of years ago. It exploded, erupted, I mean, and what happened is it put out fingers. So here's the volcano, it erupted and it made all these lava flows. And so the whole town of Los Alamos is built on these ridges.
Oh, cool.
And so there's a town canyon, houses canyon, town, I mean, all the labs, everything are built on these lava flows. So if you go up into the top of the mountains, it's called Valle Grande. It's the caldera or the hole where it erupted.
Wow.
It's still there today.
That's cool.
And here's just a quick picture to kind of show the fencing area around the town and the signs they hung, contaminated area, stay out. And here's kids on their bikes right up with the fence. And I mean,
Was that the fence around the whole city or like around the lab?
around the whole city. So, I mean, it just kind of shows you that we knew no different. The kids were just, they tried to make it as normal a city as possible. Here's some old pictures of what the lab areas were like. This is probably, some of their equipment. These are some of the buildings.
So, like, growing up in Los Alamos, but just sort of back then, like, what were just some of the fun parts of being able to walk anywhere you wanted and feeling super safe? And then what were also some of, like, the harder parts of, oh, you're not allowed to go over there, or we've already been here 100 times, like, I want to go do something else kind of thing?
Right. Minimal shopping. From what you all have today, we didn't have a mall, we didn't have a lot of restaurants. Growing up, way up in the mountains, I didn't even know what air conditioning was. I mean, a hot day would be maybe 80. I don't know if those are good or bad things, but the good parts is you pretty much you knew everybody in town. The shop, they had one center in town where most of the shopping was. It had a grocery store, a drugstore, a bakery, shoe store, a movie theater, a bowling alley. Everything was confined right in an area.
There was like one of everything.
Yeah. And there was no competition for businesses. And so as a child growing up, you just learned all that. I mean, you knew that was just normal to me. To go to a big city, Albuquerque or Denver, Colorado or something, it's like, it would be very overwhelming because there was so much,
And so the shoe store, the bakery, the movie theater, were those a lot of, like, families came, the scientists came, and then like wives were like, oh, we're gonna start a bakery and a
Exactly.
shoe store.
Exactly. The women that came in with a lot of the scientists were teachers, and that's who our teachers were.
Mm-hmm.
The community tried to be, encompass everybody,
Mm-hmm.
you know, into the community. Most of the women were, I would say, were probably housewives. They had a lot of women's clubs, bridge, you know, social, I mean, they,
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't know anything, they banded together.
Yeah.
From everything I've read, a lot of drinking, that was their only social, was they partied every weekend, the scientists, the wives. They were very close. During the initial time frame they were building the bomb, they changed all the scientists' names. They didn't actually carry, I can't remember, I'd have to look through my notes, but Oppenheimer, let's say, was Jack Black. Or, I mean, they just gave them fake names.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't want anyone out of the community to know who these people were, who the scientists were that came in from Italy, Germany, other countries. They changed all their names.
Wow.
And the wives' names had to be changed also for all the scientists.
Oh, really?
It wasn't Mr. and Mrs. Oppenheimer, it was Mr. and Mrs. Farmer, or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, my childhood days were very calm, very relaxed, not a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just very simple life. I mean, all the kids knew each other for many years because they all went to the same school.
Yeah.
I lived right next door to my school. It was that quad unit, and then the school was right, so I could walk from kindergarten on. I walked right to the school. Even when I moved to the next school, I still walked, which was further away, but
Yeah.
we came home for lunch. We had no cafeterias or anything.
Oh,
So
really?
we came home every day for lunch and walked back to the school, and 3 o'clock, whatever, walked back home. Yeah.
Wow.
You all are very spoiled now. I think my first car that my family gave me in high school when I started driving was like a 1940 or 50 Hudson, an old beat-up jalopy.
And so for, like, when you and all your friends started getting driver's license, they would put your name on it?
Correct.
Okay. It was just the scientists
Right.
who were number 44 or something like
Right.
that.
When I was little, growing up, the only way you could ride a bicycle was you had to get a license.
Oh, really?
So we all had a license to ride our bikes.
That's cool.
The government was very much in control,
Mm-hmm.
and they still are for the labs. The community is now very open. I mean, you could go up there today and buy a home and live there
Mm-hmm.
and start a restaurant or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not a community like Tucson, Arizona, where you have all kinds of shopping, variety of malls, and the town even today still only has a few businesses.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
a dress shop or a drugstore, or, I mean, there's just not a huge variety.
So is it today, like, still a very close community in terms of, like, the people?
I think, don't know how correct I am, but I think there's about 16,000 people that live there today. And when I first moved up there, there was probably 30,000 that were working at the labs, and then it started diminishing. So by the time I graduated, it was probably about 16,000. So it stayed right.
Same number.
You know, the town has had several very major fires.
Oh,
One
really?
fire wiped out about 2/3 of the city,
Oh, wow.
homes. And they're just, because it's in the mountains, all the trees, all the foliage.
Is there anything else that you remember and would like to share?
No, I think it's a town to go to today to visit and just kind of get the feel. I don't know how much radiation is actually there. They knew so little about it, they just dumped it in the ground. I know of someone that was hired to go up and start cleaning up the town, and their comment was, it's not going to happen. There's so much stuff. So,
Wow.
and the government's very aware of that. Our government today knows there's a lot of, and how active the radiation is, I don't, it might be totally dormant. It might be totally. My sister, one of my sisters worked for the labs for 42 years.
Wow.
And she ended up being very high up in the security department. And if you ask her when she retired, okay, you're retired now, you can tell me everything, all the secrets. And she said, yeah, I can, and then I have to kill you.
Wow.
So she won't, even though I've said, oh, tell me some things. And she was like, no, you can't.
Even after
Oh,
they've
yeah.
stopped working there, it's just so like ingrained that you just don't say anything.
They have caught several spies coming in through the years.
Wow.
That still try to sneak in and see what's going on.
Like even today.
Yeah, it wasn't, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. I don't know when they caught some Asian fella came in. That I don't know all the details, but still, the labs, you and I couldn't drive up there and say, oh, I want to drive through the labs. You can't. It's all still very gated and security guards, and yeah, you have to have a pass to get in and out.
So the lab has more turned into like the military base kind of thing.
Well, they're just big labs. I mean, they've built all new laboratory buildings, and I mean, when I was there, they were all just wooden barrack type buildings, and that's where they did all their testing. I know people died during the testing periods, just unknown, not knowing how dangerous it was.
When you were little or even like a teenager, was there ever like stories that would just sort of go around town like, oh my gosh, did you hear about so-and-so? They passed away at the lab.
I don't remember it. There's more stories now.
Yeah.
Of people. My father died of lung cancer, and the government rewarded him. Rewarded my mom
Yeah.
after his death, because they knew what he worked in, what he worked with. And the government just compensated to say, I'm sorry he didn't know, and I'm sorry he worked with it. We thankfully he did,
Yeah.
but so the government's been very good. And not to give you a lot of details, but there was 3 areas in the United States that worked primarily on the bombs.
Yeah.
Los Alamos was actually built the bomb.
Oh, okay.
Place in Washington, state of Washington,
Yeah.
took care of some of the chemicals, plutonium that came part of the bomb.
Yeah.
Oak Ridge, Tennessee worked with ingredients. So the three areas worked together, even though it's so far apart, but to actually make the atomic bombs, both of them. And they were both very secretive also.
The other two cities?
Yeah, in Tennessee, they had Oak Ridge people, all in Tennessee had no idea what was going on in this little community.
Wow. Have you ever looked up or heard of, like, people from Washington or Tennessee that they sort of have, like, a similar, like, childhood and story of just kind of like,
I can't say I ever really met anybody, but I've researched and read
yeah.
all about them, and they're very, very similar. They just took a remote area and built a community.
Yeah.
Barracks and huts and fenced in, secretive. There's many books out there about the whole process of the atomic bomb. Which needs to be studied a lot today so people know. You know, people will ask me, are you embarrassed? Is it hard for you to say, yeah, I grew up where they built the atomic bomb? Because so many people don't understand or don't know why it was done. And in a lot of people's eyes, it was just horrific. It was horrible what the United States did to Japan without really knowing the whole scenario, the whole story. So I have never been embarrassed or felt bad, or I actually announced, yeah, I was raised where they built the atomic bomb, and people are like, oh, I'm sorry. But, yeah, it was a good thing in my eyes. Thank you
Thank you.
for letting me share my story.
Thank you for sharing it with me.